China, right?
Well, like some of the key, I mean,
What did they want to see? Yeah. Right, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. Oh, nice to meet you. Yeah. Okay.
Vincent, very good to see you.
Oh yeah, I had a meeting with him this morning. Oh, okay. Yes, him. I was over at the USAID, the tower, at the new tower. Hi, Cindy. How are you? All right.
hi everyone, we're just about to start. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, and also to viewers on Facebook. Sorry for lack of notice, but we're live streaming this session as well. And I'm Gwen Robinson, former president of the Foreign Correspondents Club, editor-at-large at Nikkei Asia. And this is an unusual lunchtime discussion put together primarily because we have with us two rare visitors to Bangkok who I'll introduce shortly. And we're very fortunate that they could make time to join us today. Before we turn to that, I just wanted to highlight also the club is coming up to the end of year season where we'll close for a while over Christmas, New Year. There are a few more interesting events before that, and including for those obviously who have Myanmar interest, if you're watching this, we have a film screening and discussion next week on Wednesday, December the 7th, a very interesting documentary made by some young Burmese about the nature of the resistance and the protest movement with a focus on political prisoners. There'll be a report released that night as well by Athan Group. So that is an evening event. And in addition, we have a few far more lighter events coming up, including the FCCT Christmas dinner on December the 16th. All are welcome. That's a very jolly evening and lots of good food, as well as some musical events tonight. An Australian Aussie band playing tonight at the club, and next Friday also we'll have a very entertaining pianist, Greg Field, playing. So do look at our website or Facebook. And with that, I'd like to turn to the topic of our discussion today, Myanmar's tortured path, where next? So as you know, we've got two very prominent speakers with us, and just to introduce them with a little more detail than on the program, next to me is Dr. Mimi Winbird. I first met Mimi in Myanmar many years ago, where she was helping to run an extremely effective microfinance network, among other things. Anyway, she's based in Hawaii, and while she does many, many other things related to Myanmar and the region, her day job is professor at the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies in Hawaii, where she researches, teaches, and publishes in areas of US-Myanmar relations, regional dynamics and implications of inequality on security, and the roles of the private sector, women, and education in socioeconomic development. She also served for 28 years in the US Army Reserves, retiring as a lieutenant colonel after specializing in fields such as civil-military relations. She holds an MBA with emphasis in Asia-Pacific economics and business from the University of Hawaii, and earned her doctorate in education leadership from the University of Southern California. Next to her is Min Zin, Executive Director and founding member of the Institute for Strategy and Policy Myanmar, which is an independent think tank focused on Myanmar. As a comparative political scientist who studies civil-military relations, democratization, ethnic conflicts and civil war in Myanmar and the region, he's a PhD candidate at the Department of Political Science at the University of California, Berkeley. But also, more important, equally important, as a high school student, he became an activist in Burma's democracy movement in 1988 and went into hiding in 1989 to avoid arrest by the then junta. His underground activist-cum-writer life lasted for 9 years until he fled to the Thai-Myanmar border in August 1997, and the rest, as he can attest, is history. So I'd like to open with Mimi, who's going to give us a quick take on your view of the whole thing as you see it. So over to you, Mimi.
Okay, yes. Aloha, everybody. Mingalava. Thank you for having me. And I don't have anything, formally prepared, but I want to start my talk a little bit with strategic importance of Myanmar. Right, strategic importance of Myanmar in this region. That's because I work a lot on, security dynamics of this region, and why it is not only it is important for Myanmar, but it's also important for this region's stability and security. Right, because it's strategically located. I think that this audience is different from the many of the audiences I talked in United States, because many times U.S., they don't know where Myanmar is. So I always have to orient that. But I just want to start at why we should pay attention to this, and why international community and then also the neighbors need to pay attention to this it is because strategically located, right? Because during World War II, Japan, needed this Myanmar, right, in order for it to control Asia. Before that, India, right, if it wants to control this part of the world, Myanmar is really important because it's to the western end of the Malacca Strait, which is one of the most important trade route in this region, and about a third of the world trade goes through there, right? So, so I would argue that Myanmar, and of course we have a strategic competition going on, right, between the major powers, and in that calculus, Myanmar played prominently in that, because Myanmar provide backdoor to the Indian Ocean for China. So with all that in that context, of geopolitical context, Myanmar, is happening today. And so many of the, Gwen wanted me to talk about liberal geopolitical, and, of course, for China, that is really, really important. And China has decided, that they assume that the military, historically, military will always win. So that's why they put the support. But in reality, that, the first time ever, right, that the Myanmar military on its heel. It is unable to really compete mill to mill on the ground, so they have to go to the air and air power and have to go after the civilian population, right? And it goes to show you that in a way, China, as much as it pay attention to Myanmar, they always get it wrong. They always get it wrong. And because they get it wrong is because they are so focused on themselves. They never try to find win-win situation, win-win area. So, but nevertheless, and so they're playing that. And meanwhile, the people, resistance has it's continued to amazingly resilient. Amazingly resilient. They still reject it. Last night I saw, up in Sagaing, in the middle part of Myanmar, they had a night protest. In spite of all the brutality and killing that they have been getting from the Myanmar military. So, and I think that left alone, Myanmar military versus the people resistance, I think they can beat it. But I think that because of the help from Russia and China supporting the military, I think that Myanmar people on the resistance side need a little bit of help from the international community. But as well as, I think that within Myanmar itself, right, they have achieved a huge success, unprecedented success. But in order for them to get to the next phase, get to the tipping point, right? Tipping point. Right now, they're at a very much balance. Tipping point, they need to come together much closer, tighter cooperation and collaboration. They have to get to that to achieve the unity of command, unity of effort. In that's one of the 9 principles of war is important, is a unity of command and unity of effort. So, in order for them to get that tipping point, but in that particular area, I think that the international community can do a lot in trying to help heal the many of the different groups, and so that they can come together, they can empathize with each other, and they can come to political cooperation and agreement to work. Once they have the political agreement and guarantee, I think that the military cooperation will be much easier. But so that's why I'm just saying the international community can play a huge role in it. And in a way, ASEAN has unprecedentedly has been doing a lot of support for the people as well. And I was just in Jakarta interviewing some people, and they expect that Indonesia is going to be the chair next year, and Indonesia is not going to be it's not going to go easy on the Myanmar military, because one, they felt that they had Myanmar military has showed disrespect in the international arena by not following any part of the 5-point consensus. I mean, they appreciate the people getting released, the Sean Tunnel and the several people, but that doesn't, they shouldn't have been in imprisonment in first place, right? And it was just to, in a way, the pressure did work, right? So I think that instead of releasing the brake, I think that you need to put more pressure on it, because the pressure does work, right, for them. And for the upcoming, I think ASEAN, under the Indonesia, they're going to get more. And I think that they may, there's a lot of discussion going on, and they may try to suspend Myanmar from, being able to make, being a part of the decisions is some of the discussion going on in ASEAN. And if they were able to do that, that would be unprecedented for ASEAN, right? Unprecedented for the ASEAN. So, yes. So, international community has a lot of role to play in this, and because it is not only just for Myanmar, but it's also the regional stability and security. Myanmar is having stability in Myanmar, having democracy in Myanmar is good for the region and good for our Indo-Pacific region. So.
Oh, thanks, Mimi. Sorry, just to clarify, are you suggesting that there is one route is to engage and negotiate with the junta, the SAC?
I mean, what are you saying?
Oh, sorry, I just didn't quite get what you meant about cooperation, whether you were suggesting that the resistance should engage or negotiate.
Well, I think that negotiation should be on the table somewhere, but there has to be some type of they have to show some seriousness, right? So stop the violence right away, right, and release the prisoner. That would show that they're serious about negotiating, right? Because short of that, it's just talking for the sake of talking, and it doesn't get you anywhere. And plus, on top of it, Myanmar military has a history of not living up to the agreement. Exactly. Not agreement, right? Yeah. So until the international community is supposed to able to provide some type of enforcement mechanism, or Myanmar military is wounded severely, or stop the violence right away. I think that short of those things, getting into the talk or negotiation may be premature and fruitless.
And what role do you think peace negotiations with ethnic armed groups have in the sort of overall picture?
Right. Well, but like I said, in the resistance side, they have to come together. All the forces on the resistance side, ethnic armed groups, PDFs, NUG, all that stuff, they have to come together to have a unity of effort if they want to get to this tipping point. Right now, I would say, Tony will agree, they're at the very much stasis, right? They're balanced but to get to the tipping point, you need that unity of effort. Mm-hmm. Mass, right, is one of the military principle of war. But so they have to negotiate with the ethnic army, and like I said, I think that the political agreement is probably something that is needed, and then that will lead to more of a on the military on the ground cooperation. And,
right. Okay, thank you. We'll come back to that, and just to remind, we will take questions from the floor after this discussion. So over to you, Minzin. You've got some slides here.
Thank you. Thank you, Gwen, and also FCCD for having me. And also very good to see friends, new friends, old friends again. Let me start with that, where we are now. I would say Myanmar since 2021 February, we have experienced seismic shift, It's a huge change. We cannot expect things will be going away on its own easily. That's why some neighboring country might hope, just entertain agnostic, approach toward Myanmar, things will get over by itself. I don't think so. I think that we've seen that seismic shift since the coup. The second point that's related to this is that's why return to normalcy, the way that even United States even often frame it, return to normalcy, return to democracy, restore democracy, that type of thing is, I think, getting more and more distant, difficult, harder hope. So I don't think the idea of return to normalcy is no longer hold water. So that's why but at the same time, every actors, PDF, ERO, EAO, NUG, SAC, even China, they try to impose their version of new normal. I mean, let me use the COVID language, right? The new normal. But the problem is we are still hanging between, because new normal is not yet being developed, not yet being shaped, properly. So we are just hanging in between that, the no longer and the not yet. That's what we call it, like basically the post-normal. Myanmar is now in the process of post-normal. What do we mean by that, post-normal? I think there are at least 5 features, 5 characteristics of post-normal Myanmar. One is that Burmese military has experienced unprecedented challenges in terms of their legitimacy, which I mean Burma Buddhist domination of state, which I mean Tambador or Burmese military as a guardian of the state. That's just been seriously contested, if not absolutely damaged, at least seriously contested. Second point is that Tambador is the only institution in the country. That was the centrality of Tambador in the country. That seemed to be, largely refuted by the new generation. So that's a second thing. The third element is that the credibility of Tambador, the Burmese military, to even pacify, stabilize the country. That's what they used to do very good. They are good at killing people effectively. Now they kill people recklessly without having any effect. So that's the idea of legitimacy, centrality, credibility seem to be like falling apart. That's a very important feature of this post-normal Myanmar. Second thing is society has been increasingly militarized. Militarization takes place at least in 2 ways. One is the mobilization of resources. The country is very poor, right? But people donate, people provide, people contribute to basically serve the military objective, to kill how many military dogs, to blow up how many military tracks. So that type of, the extraction and mobilization of resources are mainly to serve for the military objective. For the good reason, because people have strong grievances. But in a way, people, you will see in the dry zone, people sold out their lamp lot just to buy IED, just to blow up a few truck of the, like the supplier or military truck. So like that's one key issue we should not overlook, the mobilization of resources. The second point is largely, mainly because of the Burmese military they dismantle the mainstream media. They just destroy the freedom of speech. That's why the entire information ecology seemed to be shifted to the social media. Then you see more and more sensational, radical, too much, in a way, information ecology has been also militarized, mainly about military victory, military territorial control. So like, it's very difficult if you want to be like more reason analysis. It's very difficult to get the good information, balanced information, professional information right now. So that's the militarization of society is another phenomenon. The third that we all know in terms of economic and humanitarian crisis, is going to get more and more intensified. That will have a huge spillover. That's for us so far, neighboring country try to entertain the idea, look, Myanmar issue, you have more IDP, that situation is very much contained within the territory. It's not exploding, it's imploding. So we are okay. Let the war give the war, a chance. So that type of, opportunistic, the stance will not be sustainable, because next year we will see more food security problem and other humanitarian crises. So that's the third growing phenomenon. The fourth one is the 2 years in, we will see more and more complex engine of conflict. It's not, of course, the Myanmar military is the most, atrocious, brutal, the culprit, right? The perpetrator of the violation. But at the same time, you have so many other actors, who have different preferences, different objectives, different strategies. So it's a complex driver of the conflict. When you add on Chinese political economy, when you add on other neighboring countries' interests. So I think that the Myanmar conflict is not as simple as beauty versus, beast. Of course, beast is quite clear, but they're not single beauty that we can identify, because there's so many people can take so many different moral and political high ground or low ground or medium ground to compete for their own interests. And then the last one is very unfortunate with that global, regional, geopolitical competition, right? it seems like normally we can have the minimum consensus how to get, how to address Myanmar problem, right? This is very, very much an inhumane situation. But because of that geopolitical competition, I think geopolitics somewhat disproportionately overshadow diplomacy. So that's the final feature of the post Myanmar, right? So the post normal Myanmar. Let me give like a few data that we in our institute we compile. You can check on our website. I just want to highlight why the grievances are so intense, because people are being ruthlessly, brutally, like punished. I mean, the Burmese military, I don't think they want to win over right now in the dry zone or in that region. They just want to punish the resistance. That's why one of the main, you can interpret the airstrikes in different ways, but one way to interpret is to punish them. Of course, another way is inefficiency, ineffectiveness, right? But one way I think we should not downplay is they want to punish people. So the punitive strategy is very important too. So see, here you go. You have that within like almost 2 years. You see how many airstrikes and how many people got killed. At least in our even data, at least 216 civilians got killed because of airstrikes. It's a huge number. And then this is a breakdown in the different townships of Myanmar. And when you go on, you will see that only in 1 month, in October 2022, you had 57 airstrikes. More than 10 people got killed in only 1 month. And then you have one key, like illustrative example. I mean, even you can exclude a number recent Parkan issue because Myanmar military like argue this is a military target. Let's pick the Layagong. Basically, all these underage kids are being targeted by the airstrikes. So that's how atrocious the situation is. Again, you have that. I can keep going on that how many properties are being destroyed and torched. These are very different from 1988. In 88, we did not see that much of like headshot, like killing, aiming at the head, that type of thing, and like confiscation of the houses and properties of the activists. We did not see that much, blatant, brutal crackdown. Now you have that IDP, like as I said, like 1.5 million. And then unprecedentedly, these things taking place in the central Myanmar, right? There's the Zagai and Magwe and Dry Zone. So again, this is the clashes. So I don't want to like go very detailed, but you can check on our website. Let me shift a bit, from that characterization of the post-normal Myanmar to more like what kind of scenario we can expect, right? One thing is, I would say, baseline scenario. This is what military has been pushing forward, right? Military has been like trying to implement, which is the roadmap. The holding the elections in 2023 is one of the key, the most probably important strategy for the Burmese military, Myanmar military, to push ahead with their own unilateral roadmap. This is one possible scenario. You can have a variation, like some people advocate for this for the different reason. We can talk about it later on. And then second point is more like worst case scenario. No one really win, and then they cannot like stabilize the country, and then you have the very low intensity anarchy for some period of time. And then Myanmar will become more or less disaggregated sovereign. Nominally, you have a Myanmar map, but the entire San Luin Basin, eastern part of Myanmar will be incorporated into like Greater Mekong geo-economically. Southern Myanmar will be like incorporated into different economic entities. So like that's another worst case scenario. This is also not unusual in Myanmar. Since the fall of Bagan, when you look at the Myanmar history, the low intensity anarchy is the default option in Myanmar history. So we cannot rule out this possibility. And of course, the military will extend its rule and also the situation I outlined already. And then we have China, China element too, because we cannot dodge when we talk about Myanmar, right? China is very important. interesting thing is China so far managed the attempt to decouple their interests away from the conflict map. When you try to match conflict map and Chinese interest map, you can see Chinese try their best to decouple their interests away from the conflict map. Second, Chinese are like activating. I think like this is one different from many other countries. China never see Myanmar military Tamador as the only reliable security partner. They always diversify. There are a few other countries, they take it for granted, like Myanmar military as the only reliable security partner. They got screwed, right? So China, they have a more diversified, like the security partner. Maybe we can call it proxy player. So they activated, especially after the military coup. The third is, when you look at the pattern of Chinese investment and the Chinese trade and the corridor they built recently, the Indian transshipping route to the recent Guangxi, Yangon, trade route, all of these investments are very strategic, intend to hold choke point in the Myanmar economy. So the Myanmar structurally cannot disengage, decouple away from China, because China learned the lesson from the Missom Dam. So this time, the way they invest, the way they make trade are very strategic, because they can maintain the choke point of Myanmar. And then the fourth is also quite interesting. During the Wu Teng-sei and Aung San Suu Kyi period, Chinese trying to de-border the Myanmar-China border. But because of the conflict, they are having a hard time to we have so many examples, like how China shift from Muse to Chin-Shui Hall for a good reason, right? To do the border trade. So that now like they're trying to re-bordering Myanmar by using their own security partners. I think in this regard, they pay more attention to entire Sanlun Basin. How do we make sure if instability keep going on in Myanmar, how Sanlun Basin can be incorporated in Chinese-style development into Greater Mekong. You can link this up with the Lanchan Mekong initiative and RCEP initiative that you can see more political economy dimension of the conflict. So then, this is the two maps we did. The one was maybe like early this year, where we saw that Chinese managed to decouple a lot with their interests and their away from the conflict. But recently, we found out that some of the clashes and fighting are getting double, even in around the Chinese project. But still, when you compare with India border, Thai border, Bangladesh border, China is still like maintaining that decoupling, effectiveness. So to me, we don't have English language translation for this new map. But the idea is, I just want to compare, even though you have that double clashes. But again, if oppositions are very smart, they can use this to frame, look, situation does not guarantee stability. That's what China, India, Thailand prefer, right? That because things are like getting worse and worse to basically threaten the stability that neighboring country wish for. And then let me move. Can I have a few more minutes, right?
Oh, totally.
Okay.
Absolutely. No. Carry on. We've got...
Okay, it's an intervention thing, right? Usually there are two types of intervention. One is like very much all or nothing, right? Because of the strong grievances, the new generation, the general public, they don't want to hear anything about Burmese military. They just want to get rid of this, They don't know how, but they're so tired. So that's very much zero-sum, all or nothing is one discourse or narrative you can see from social media to the speeches of the leadership, right? Second approach is like more or less conflict transformation. I think many ethnic armed groups and EROs, they are most sensitive to this approach. But they know, in this case, I think you all know difference between conflict resolution and conflict transformation, not just addressing the causes of the conflict, but also try to transform the system where conflict embedded in, basically social, cultural, structural, economic, all these things. Like broader, more ambitious conflict transformation strategy, I think that's what many EROs, EAOs are most sensitive, right? Many of Burma, I myself is a Burma Burma, ethnic and Buddhist, we have our own paradigm, which is very similar to, it's different from the ethnic thinking. Our thinking is mainly to do with that, I call it dethroning mentality. So basically, in the Burmese game, we call it Nancha Bayan, say that, right? So we wage revolution with that dethroning mentality because these guys remove me from the power. I'm going to take it back because I'm the legitimate ruler of the country. So this is very much, that when you see that from Kongbao, Bagan, you name it, all these Burmese games, they have been exiled, mobilize the people, try to fight back, get the power back. But for the ethnic community, for them it's very easy, right? For them, like, no, don't touch us, leave us alone. Right? We don't want to mess up with the center. We don't want to mess up with you, Burma, right? Just leave us alone. So they have their own alternative moral and political universe. They have their own alternative political vision. They want to speak their own language. They want to say their own prayer. Right? They want to do their own businesses, even it might be primordial or whatever. It doesn't matter. Just leave us alone. If you push too much, we'll push you back. That's how, that the way that ethnic resistance movement you can understand. For Burma, it's different. So after almost a year and a half, 2 years, you have that divergent trend, right? Burma, who think they are just trying to get the power back, but the ethnics are, no, our job is leave us alone. But that leave us alone can be interpreted in institutional way differently, right? Federalism or confederation or whatever you name it. But idea is leave us alone. So these two paradigms are more and more divergent along the process. Anyway, so let me go back to that intervention scenario. Both scenario is will have a hard time. If you want to do like all or nothing revolutionary pathway, I think you will see that at least three important issues that need to be present. One is either counter coup or split within the military that favor resistance movement. That's also very important. Or like generally speaking, unless you have the military reform within, it's very difficult for the opposition to pursue all or nothing approach. Second, you need effective foreign supports, as the Mami already insinuated, right? Hinted that, unless we have that foreign supports or, intervention, it's very difficult to entertain the idea of radical transformation. The third is, it's another element that is very difficult. You need to get all key ethnic armed groups to get together and rally behind common position. So unless you have one out of three or maybe all three together, it could be like, snowball effect too. One can lead to other. But the thing is, these are the three important factors we need to consider if you are aiming for. Rhetorically fine, we can talk about all or nothing, wipe out, no negotiation, fight. But still, unless you have these three, you will be having a hard time. And then conflict transformation people like me, we also have our own problem, because we need to reframe the crisis from very much, zero-sum radicalism to conflict transformation. It's very difficult, even in terms of language in Myanmar, because we are not that, exposed to these different big concepts that, about the conflict and peace. So that's one. How do we reframe? How do we reshape the narrative? That's a major challenge for all of us in this, especially social media age. The second is, how do we strengthen? All these noodle bowls of special envoys, right? They have their own interest. I think lately I feel that they are having special envoys just basically to get information rather than to address a Myanmar problem. So that's another thing. So that's another issue. The third is, how do you defend and empower, moderate civil space? But in Myanmar, again, the line that divide moderate and apologists are very thin. I have never seen people who can cross back and forth between that line except Aung San Suu Kyi, right? She can say the Rohingyas are set fire their own villages and leave in the name of reconciliation, right? She can do it, but other people cannot do it because this is, in Myanmar, is very much either or type of, that in-group, out-group is very strong. So that is so difficult to create moderate the civic space. So these are also very challenging for all of us. So then let me go down one more level, which is when we talk about that all or nothing or conflict transformation, both have challenges, but when we think in both strategy approaches, when we think of the strategy, we should think along the time horizon, not just sweeping away. So for the long term, I think we all agree we have aspiration for federalism, democracy, and justice. Right? That's very much, of course, we need to conceptualize and operationalize what we mean by federalism, but still, at least abstract consensus is we want this. In the short term, I think we are quite clear. We don't, aside from the very radical view, we want to avoid societal collapse. Because if society collapses, it will be military who will benefit a lot. Because they can like build their wall higher with a different type of appetite. But for the people will suffer a lot. So we want to avoid societal collapse. Second, we want to maintain resistance, against injustice. That's because if you give up, I mean, you will be really, spiritually or emotionally, being broken. So that's we cannot accept that. But the problem, we are okay with short term. We are okay, more or less okay with the long term. The problem is, what is our medium term goal? What do we want? What do we want? Like in next 3 to 5 years. Next 3 to 5 years, I don't think we will have satisfactory level of democracy, satisfactory level of like self-determination and federalism. No, what do we want for next 3 to 5 years? People try to conflate that medium-term goal with the long-term aspiration. When you go ask them, you want democracy, we want federal, we don't want military. Yes, this is a long-term aspiration. How do we get there? What is our medium-term goal? That's I think the challenge for all of us. Unless we get consensus on this, it's very difficult to make the needle move in the neighboring country. Because this is what they want to know. What kind of next 3 to 5 year plan do you have? So bottom line for medium-term goal to me is, I think that 2010-12 transition failed mainly because of structural problem. Of course, people can blame Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi, and different individual agents, but the main problem is the Burmese military maintained the veto status. And then this veto status over the country's fate, fortune, is not just temporary matter. It's a long-term, permanent. Right? If they don't agree, they can just turn the table off. They don't really care. So we have been like in the peace process, businesses, everything. If they don't agree, they can change it. They can rewrite the rules because they maintain that veto status. So to me, if you want to do any other future transitional arrangement, medium-term goal, the bottom line should be Burmese military must give up their veto status. How do we do it? It's very difficult, but it's very baseline that we should abide by. And then I was so like 2000. Let me zoom zoom in mainly on the 2023, because we are approaching the end of this year. I think there are 3 critical issues that we may want to pay attention to. One is sham election schedule in 2023. That's a like very important issue. Second is, I think that's a weakening confidence of ethnic EAOs and EROs in the possibility of union level, national level contract. And then by default, they're going back to their own unit level contract making. So in Myanmar, union level, national level contract never succeed. When you look at that PANLO, failed. NCA, Nationwide Ceasefire Accord, failed. FDC, like Federal Democracy Charter, is now not functioning well as the way ethnic expect to function. So like the faith, the confidence in that union level, national level contract is now like, it's weakening. And on the other hand, they have their own state constitution, like, unit level considerations are more and more prominent lately. In the previous 3 to 5 months, we can detect the process. The third thing is like intensification of humanitarian crisis. So these are the 3 elements that will be very important trend that we should pay attention to in 2023. Let me give you very briefly. Election, of course, some domestic actors and countries in the neighbor, they can definitely argue, they can definitely, come up with their own advocacy, say, oh, something is better than nothing, right? So that's their argument, But most of them were like agnostic, opportunistic view, right? Don't say anything. If things go well, they will jump on the bandwagon, move on. People want to move on, right? That's an issue when it comes to the Myanmar neighbors. The second thing is, for me, like, it would be misguided. We need to make it very clear to compare this upcoming election with that 2010 election. In 2010, it was the only game in town, whether we like it or not. Even though we disagree with the 2008 constitution, it was the only game in town. And then, that the memories of 1990 election was far, 20 years. And also that there's no new generation energy, in the country. So right now, I don't think that's to compare this election. That's a tendency in many diplomats and many donors and say, oh, look, in 2010, this is how you get the breakthrough. I think we should say, no, this election will trigger more instability, more violent, more bloodshed. If you endorse, you will be complicit in that violence. And then this election will not lead to political exit because, as we all know, very unilateral. And this election will be morally offensive to the Burmese people because they sacrifice a lot. So if you don't want to support, don't mess up with this because it's very morally offensive. Right? So that's a key point that I want to raise. And then for the opposition to the Herculean tax, to come up with an alternative plan. It's not enough to say no, rejection of the election is not enough, because you need to come up with that alternative. That's why I think it's very important to come up with the medium-term goal, transitional arrangement. That's reflect desire of the people of Myanmar. But it must be reasonable and pragmatic that can diplomatically leverage too, right? Of course, we have other means, military means, but diplomatically leverage too. And then for the ethnic issue, I think that unit level contract, the state constitution issue, is important. It's a politically and morally must, because they have to do it. And this is important for their life and their community. The question is this: if that unit level state constitution effort or unit level initiative doesn't go hands in hand with that union level commitment or national level consideration, you will have a huge problem. Because this country has never been a modern nation state. So you will have a huge problem. At least you have three problems. One is, in each unit are not homogeneous. Right? There are so many intra-ethnic and even like region tension and conflict. So it's very important to, unless you really incorporate that two national level and unit level go together, unless you can do it, it would be very difficult, because in the unit level, there is no democracy and there's no political platform. Minority of minority can play a role. So that would be key challenge. The second challenge is, if we talk about unit level contract, who's going to represent Burma unit? By default, it would be Burmese military, because they have more arms, right? So that's another challenge for all of us. The more you push for that solely unit level, I'm not saying unit level is very important, but if you don't go hands in hand with that national level vision, you will have a problem. Who's going to represent Burma unit? The third is Burma nationalism. I think Burma, don't get me wrong, in Burma Buddhists, we always think our fight is noble fight. Our fight is the most important fight and final fight. So if you don't rally behind me, you have some issue. Right? So like, we back you, right? We apologize you already. You don't really help me. And then we don't really understand that different paradigm. So we don't really help me. Then the problem is, at the end, if you pursue that only your own state, ethnic, parochial interest, we don't care. We Burma are super majority. That type of Burma nationalism, not coming from the military, but coming from the broader democracy activists and public intellectual in the Burma community. I'm not making sweeping statement, but we can see emergent trend among the Burma frustration because they don't get what they expect from the ethnic, and they started like, you ethnic blame us for the Burmanization that we don't commit. This is what the Burmese military did. But it's very difficult for them to understand structural nature of the racism, right? So that's a very important dynamic you can see. This new nationalism is very interesting. It's very secular. It's different from studies, 1930s or Burmese military version of nationalism. There's no Buddhism involved. It's very much radical, frustrated, anger, because they don't get what they want from the minority groups. So that's a three important challenges if you really pursue only state level, unit level, without having union level, consideration. Again, I think the important thing is we need to really the resistance movement, mainly the Burma. We need to really shift the paradigm from that dethroned king mentality mindset to more like we are also trying to build alternative political and moral universe and public service provision. It will take time. It will really take time. But otherwise, you will see divergent trend, between the minorities and then us. Okay, the last part probably is the humanitarian. Humanitarian crisis will weaken resistance movement too. Because the Burmese military, I suspect in some cases they intentionally create that disaster so that will strain the resistance movement resources and capabilities. And then that will exhaust people's will to fight. And then it's very important to go beyond binary approach. Support us, sanction the military. Support us, that kind of binary should be, should be analyzed with more nuances and more sophisticated deliberation. I think that's why it's very important. The resistance movement need to frame the conflict not largely in terms of military victory or territorial control. It's empirically problematic, but set aside this, even politically, the more you frame the crisis in terms of how many percentage of territory we control, victory is about to reach. If the more you do it, you give impression to the neighboring country that, you have that power vacuum. You have, because when you talk about percentage-wise of the territorial control, because these actors are not monolithic. The UWSA, WA, Arakan Army, Palau, Ampalau, RCS, they do not share similar view. They do not share similar preferences. Even within themselves, even among themselves, let alone with the Burma resistance movement like NUG. So when you really ask second question about who you are talking about when you talk about controlling territory of this and that, and then you will definitely see that the argument of possible power vacuum. And then in this case, neighboring country will double down the Burmese military, who they have a transactional experiences. So that's very important. We need to be how do we frame it? I think to me, framing politically is very important. No matter what, we have a unified vision. We have a unified alliance. We have a unified strategy. Even though 10%, 5%, but this is still room to grow. If you frame it in the military wise, the potential for the sustainable growth is very, very, very thing to me. So it's very important to frame it in moral and politically. So I think this is, and I think both could, right now we don't have much leverage we can do because both sides, or all sides probably, they still think they can win, right? So that's not much we can do. So the conflict within the given that 2023 elections, because of people's grievances, the conflict will escalate, and it will have a spiral, effect because you do it like tit for tat or all these things, and then politics will continue to be abandoned as a way to address the problem. And then what we can do is only creating conditions by means of pressure and by means of inducement that will enable conflict transformation when time comes. Because right now, no actors are part of the solution. Every actors want to impose their own version of new normal, which has all these constraints, right? So to me, what we can do right now is to create conditions that will enable at one point that conflict transformation will take place. So to me, that I disagree with his economic policy, but I love his code, which is Milton Friedman. He said this, only crisis can produce real change, right? And what we can do is to develop alternative to existing situation or policy, to keep them alive, available, having this type of discussion, deliberation. At the end, our effort, our preparation will become like, something helpful. When time comes, politically impossible become politically inevitable. Thank you so much.
Wow. So I think that's one of the most comprehensive, multifaceted assessments of scenarios, both present and future, that we've heard for a long time. So thank you very much for that. We've got about half an hour for questions and discussions, but I would like to make a couple of points. And one thing, I think you actually covered almost everything, so you've left really but I think this point you mentioned, the balkanisation. Let's talk about how, in all you've outlined and what you said, Mimi, how the most likely scenario, probably if elections do happen by the end of next year, is down this balkanisation track, because elections will be held only in areas that the military controls. It will be probably orderly and delivered. We can guess what the results would be in areas controlled by the military, and then other areas elections will be suspended, or possibly in those borderline areas will return a mixed result and probably violent. But on the whole, it's going to set Myanmar further down that sort of patchwork or balkanised kind of scenario I think you discussed. So I wonder how that, bringing it really to the short term, where we'll be in a year's time if those elections go ahead. But secondly, I think you also, both of you could maybe look a little bit at, we've got the role of the international community. You mentioned ASEAN, we've had a bit on China. We haven't really talked about Russia, which in a way is making up for some of the shortfall, or a lot of the shortfall from in lack of international or faltering international engagement for them. But on the ground, we've got both UN agencies, a bunch of CSOs, NGOs, INGOs. They're all there. There was initial thought that a lot of them would leave, and the junta's making it very hard for INGOs to stay in there. But we've seen the UN absolutely intent, it seems, on hanging in there. But increasingly, it seems, as you say, I agree with you, the SAC, the military, seem intent on exhausting and weakening the resistance also by creating humanitarian crisis. Now, what the international organisations seem to be getting themselves into is this situation of fixing it up. So the military goes and bombs and displaces people, and it falls to the international community that's there to go and try and provide relief, shelter, whatever. So in a way, that's a very peculiar position that the international community on the ground is in Myanmar. So I wonder if you have thoughts on that, and then we'll turn to some questions. Mimi.
Okay. Well, military has only one strategy. They only know fear. And what military is doing is very predictable. They've always done it. It's the same playbook. They haven't changed. So really, they're very predictable. And I think that, yes, there's a humanitarian crisis, but I think the resistance will grow, and it's continue to be, because, Machiavelli always warned about using fear, overuse of fear, right? Fear turned into anger, and the anger become the fuel for their resolve and resistance. And that's what we're seeing. Every time they did these, they executed these political prisoner, and it right before that event, the people are getting tired, and they were kind of losing a little bit of esteem, and that event really put more fuel into the fire, and people came back with more resolve. And right now, there was an announcement of 7, being sentenced to death, and I start to see on the social media, that's why we got to continue to resist. So these are the things, and Myanmar military is a little bit out of touch as well, because the information doesn't travel up to the decision maker. They're afraid to tell him what he doesn't want to hear. So that is also a weakness within the military. And actually, in many ways, decision makers don't have any idea as to how many people and how many actually things, the real situation on the ground. They don't have, because people don't want to tell them, and they're afraid to tell them, right? But it's not just Myanmar military, but it's also dictators. And that's why he misread the whole environment. He think that he can just do this, the coup, and it'll be fine, like from the, like before, but he was out of touch with, because people, he's isolated, the information doesn't flow to him. Mm. So that also can be a weakness that can be exploited from the resistance side. Mm-hmm. So that's, yeah.
Mimsin.
Well, I think I'd go back to Mami's in her presentation, that unified resistance is very important. I think that's first and foremost, go beyond the short-termism. If you really think things will be getting done in short term, that would be difficult to, and then it will be difficult to persuade or organize or convince ethnic armed groups, let's fight against common enemy. No, it's not enough. Mm-hmm. You really need to articulate, I think the long-term, not only long-term aspiration, but also like concrete medium term. Because that's also need to be sensitive to the ethnic community, because they are the one. Now you will see the Burmese military come down and pound on the ethnic communities in Loiko and Tenderland, right? And then who feel like most, terribly devastated, because ethnic leaders, because they are the one, right, who need to be sensitive to their own community, right, and then make sure that the humanitarian assistance need to be channeled to them. So to me, I think the most important thing is to frame this crisis, this conflict, in more political means, and then pursue political understanding, not to give impression that is for the instrumental, utilitarian, short-term, purpose. So then that might make a big difference. And in a year's time? Well, that's, as I said, it's if you really have that mentality of dethroned king, you have a mindset of dethroned king, you don't think you will have enough time, because you are the legitimate, person who are being deposed. You need to think, but we are trying to build alternative, nation, new nation, and then you will have that strategic patience to work with, and also strategic, I think, and empathy with the ethnic people. Yeah. Mm.
I agree with Gominzen, right? This is a political issue. It's not real. I know people are more focused on the military, but the problem set was a political. And the Myanmar military misread it, and then they try to solve the political problem with the military solution, right? But at the end of the day, it is a political issue, and I think that focusing more on political will get, especially for the resistance side, that's their strength, right? Military wants to take them down into the military, the domain, because that's where they can win, right? So if you try to compete, about strategy, you never want to compete your enemy on their strength and your weakness, right? And in this particular, if you're looking at a much broader way, the military may be strong in militarily, but they're really weak in political. So that political solution will deliver the victory at the end for the people. So focusing on political solution, political issue is really, really essential. That's where they can make gain. And we know from a lot of revolution, right? Looking at all the successful revolution, it's always about people power. It's not about firepower. It's about people power. So how can we keep the people power? And when you talk about people power, cooperation, unity, coming together, right? So that's where the focus should be, and then
Right. Thank you. We'll take some questions. Please identify yourself. Sorry, no, it's, sorry, you have to go up to the mic up there. Yeah, we've got someone about to.
Yes, Dominic Falder, Nikkei Asia. Burma, as we know, has a terrible record on elections. 1990, the military simply walked away from it. They didn't even acknowledge it. Cyclone Nargis, terrible referendum that was forced upon people. My question to you is very simple, and that is that given the situation in the countryside at the moment, is it even possible to stage an election, however bad, however deplorable, however uncredible, later in the year? I'd be very interested to hear your opinion on that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think the military run the election. Even one person come to vote, they will declare it as a, the election was done, right? And try to get the exits, get other people to believe it. But yeah, in many places, people would be afraid to go and vote because they might be captured, right? If they go and vote, right? If they register, they will be found out. So, the election cannot be representative. It just, there's no way. And I was talking to some of the ASEAN member states, and they all, even like Cambodia and Laos, they think that it's not going to be legitimate, right? But military will try to spin it like they've always done before, and to get the, try to convince the international community or convince the people that it will go back to normal, right, based on that election.
Min Zin, did you have anything to add to that? Or maybe listen
Sorry,
to
just to follow on, my point is that they do not control the country. Yes, sure, you can have a few elections in a few areas. Mm-hmm. They simply don't control border areas. It's not possible. In 1990, I think they had 9 places they couldn't get to. The country was relatively stable. That is not the situation now. So you can't even do a Putin referendum type approach.
But which suits him fine, right? Which suits Min Online fine.
Yeah,
you just
right.
suspend.
Just
I mean, you don't want elections.
Okay, well, then that's the answer. But
well,
the point is there won't be an election.
Yeah.
But one technical
Can you
thing
speak
we
closer
want
to the
to
microphone?
consider is this. Because of the new electoral system, like the PR system, they can, I think they're already gerrymandering in terms of provinces, right, district. So I think they're likely to hold election not in township level, but the district level. So then you have only 1 or 2 polling stations inside the military compound, right? People can come and vote. They can really best people. That's what they used to do, right, all the time with the public mass rally. So I think one thing is, this is what they have been cooking. We haven't learned yet properly, comprehensively, but they are now doing a lot of homework on how do they station the polling boxes, right, ballot boxes. So then another issue is, I don't think the Mail Online has made decision. I think it's say hanging on. Of course, they already prepare. This is something similar to the military coup, right? That they allotted already a few months before the coup in February 1st, but the actual decision made very last minute. But that's typical military way of doing. Like they make people prepare. So this is what they are now doing. I think one thing is PR system will probably give them more advantage, not only in terms of vote counting, but in terms of administering the election. Yeah.
Do you want to give a very quick explanation of how that electoral system changes under PR? Sorry.
I mean, like it's very complex,
no, we don't
things.
Want long
yeah,
one.
so I mean, it would be very difficult to absorb. But I think I would say that they are pushing ahead, and that can allow them to do a lot of fraud too.
Right. It will benefit a big party like the USDP. Yeah. We had one other question there. Can you identify yourself, please? Sorry, can you speak into the microphone, please?
Sol Zadka is my name. I would like to ask both of you, would it be fair to argue that since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the Western democracies lost interest in what's happening in Myanmar today, a fact that has been exploited by the regime to intensify its repression against the people of Burma?
Yes. That's it. Yes, yeah.
Right, anything more to add on that?
Well, I want to say that I've said it in many of my interviews. Actually in Myanmar, the Russian bombs and bullets are killing Burmese people, Myanmar people, not just in Ukraine, right? But I think that, like I was saying, it's in a way it's a strategic blind spot for a lot of the democracies in Western countries, where Myanmar sits and how Myanmar could have especially for the fight for the competition between democracy and authoritarianism, and especially in this region, Indo-Pacific region, it will go a long way to show that which system fare better if you are able to keep the Myanmar on the democracy column rather than on the dictator column, right? Myanmar is really almost the last democracy on mainland Southeast Asia, mainland Southeast Asia. So yes, they should pay more attention to it, but yes, they have lost the interest in Myanmar since the Ukraine invasion.
I wonder if either of you have a proposal or a suggestion about what would possibly make the world more interested again in Myanmar.
FCCT?
Thanks. I'm touched at your confidence that the FCCT can impact the global agenda. But, and that's not to downplay, of course, what's happening in Ukraine is so horrific on a much wider scale. But what we've seen in Myanmar, the savagery and the level of human rights abuses and the sadistic nature of the attacks is actually, I think, beyond anything we're seeing anywhere else. The systematic torture, so in some ways it should really be claiming attention, but it does seem there's a global fatigue about Myanmar. Partly, I'm surprised neither of you said that it's largely because there's no independent media inside Myanmar. And, it's increasingly reliant on social media and very brave Myanmar, both journalists and citizen journalists who are uploading photos. And you've seen cases of people who are sometimes lose their lives for being spotted uploading or taking photographs of things. And it leaves us dangerously vulnerable to also what we're seeing on Twitter, the Muskification of Twitter is bound to get worse. So what's next? Where do we get information and where do you get reliable information? But that's another whole event. I hope we have some discussion about that next week. But I don't know if you've got ideas about relaying more information from inside that might change the world's attention span.
Well, we're Ukraine, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, is a very expert at utilizing the media, and also Ukraine had a government structure, right, that they're able to quickly mobilize and go with it. But the resistance side, right, they have to build the structure, and it took them a little while to figure it out, and then they have to form it on the run, right? But as well as there's also language limitation from many years of isolation, whereas Ukraine is a lot better at it, right? And the Ukraine already has a ready-made relationship, mill-to-mill relationship with with the U.S. and EU type of, whereas Myanmar doesn't have it, right? So all these things play into Myanmar kind of overshadowed by the Ukraine in that, yeah.
Right, exactly. Thanks very much. Oh, okay, we'll just take one more or two more maybe. Tony, if you're going to ask a question too, please keep it short and introduce yourself.
Yep. I'm John from Molotov Newsletter, which is an underground newsletter in Myanmar. So thank you for this insightful discussion. So throughout the discussion, as the main panelist said, the importance of Myanmar in the region cannot be left whenever you think about Myanmar. And also, Siama Mimi ended up the discussion with the whether people power, the importance of people power. So I want to say this is like, we've seen the stakeholder level, authoritarian level movement of the regional ASEAN, but like we still have found no pleasing, effective movement yet. So my question is like, in the level of unifying resistance from the region, even if people don't have common vision or crisis, you know, can it be possible to fight each crisis in each country in the region? So in short for that, my question is Burma Spring enough? Is there any sign of ASEAN Spring or Asia Spring?
ASEAN Spring, anyone?
ASEAN Spring. So you were asking, is the Myanmar Spring was spread to the neighboring country and see the ASEAN Spring? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I know that a lot of the countries are looking at it, and especially the young, right? The young really wants a true democracy where they can express their creativity and their fully utilized, not bounded by these political system that doesn't allow them to be free, right? So I think that some of the neighboring country may be afraid that could lead to that. The success of Myanmar may launch, some of the countries young to want to ask for the same, the freedom and the true democracy that they desire, right?
So do you think it should be?
It should be.
Yeah, it should be that kind of regional movement, born from the regional resistance, a collective resistance.
Well, I think that right now, a lot of the young, right, they're sharing, like Milk Tea Alliance, for example, right? Milk Tea Alliance, they're sharing the information and helping each other out. But Myanmar model, I wouldn't recommend Myanmar model right now because of the violence. But if they're able to, get their freedom and democracy, true democracy, in a more political way, that would be much more preferred than the Myanmar model right now. Yeah.
Right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mimi. And last question, I think, and then we'll close it. Goes to.
Thanks, Gwen. Tony Davis, I write for Jane's. My question relates to the political aspect of this that both of you touched on. What we're looking at now is obviously a very chaotic situation across the whole nation, and in the coming year, given military trends, that's going to get a lot worse. So the resistance as a whole is talking about revolution. Spring Revolution, it's all about revolution. The question is this: in this context, do you believe that the results of the 2020 election, and specifically the victory of the NLD in that election, is going to remain a central issue, or is it going to get overtaken by the revolutionary chaos that we're witnessing? Thank you.
Keep it short.
Well, okay, I'll keep it short. Save me. I think that the main intention of the Burmese military, they even made it very clear to some diplomats, we got screwed with this election, 2020. Now, the only exit we can do is to hold another election. So don't push us to do any other thing, only to help us to make this upcoming election smooth, because we got stuck because of 2020 NLD unwilling to cooperate. Now we are having another election. This is the best exit you can have. So that's their argument. That also threatened the resistance and threaten the resistance movement main argument. They're again divergent, right? The NLD elements or Burma elements, mainly they prefer to focus on legitimacy, like mainly like de jure legitimacy component of the revolution. We are the one being elected, right, by the people. That's why we are representative of the people. That's a one trend. But many younger generation, they think it should go beyond. I think that's a like main tension between like within the resistance movement. That's why I'm saying like paradigm shift is needed, because if you really focus on your power is taken away, you're being deposed, your job is to take it back. We call it in Myanmar, nancha and say that, right? If you have that dethroning mindset, it's very difficult for ethnic to walk with you for the long run, because you need not just election result being denied, that type of motivation. You need hope and vision for the future to build alternative moral and political nation.
So what you're saying is the older generation is going to hold on to the
I don't say like older generation, even that some younger generation. I'm not saying this is wrong. My point is, if you want to make it effective, unified movement, you need to have a bigger heart and far away vision and insight. Not just see the ethnic as a way you can instrumentalize to rally behind your fight. You really need to put yourself in their shoes, so that, I think that's a two different paradigm. I'm saying like, now after the election, you're right. That will be more challenging for those who want to, it's important. Election is very important too, again, but don't get me wrong. I'm not denying the importance of 2020 election. But my point is, how do we make it more effectively with that alternative vision?
Yeah. So, 2020 election was, NLD had a landslide, right? So in the CRPH, when they formed the CRPH, it's like 80% NLD, but that doesn't represent, the ethnic group believe that it doesn't really represent them, right? So if you want a broader thing, and that's why the NUCC was formed. So you have the NLD, CRPH representative, which is like majority of it is NLD, right? And then you have the ethnic group, and then you have the civil society, to get the much more broader representation of people interest and view. Because the 2020 election was NLD had the landslide, right? And the rest of the country in post-coup didn't believe that it was representing all of their interests. So making the NUCC work, and people feel like they have to feel represented, represented. Their interests are being represented is the principle. And mechanism, it can be NUCC, but whatever it is, it has to go beyond just the NLD, because the ethnic groups feel that, minority ethnic groups feel that NLD, alone doesn't represent their interest. Right.
Yeah, I think like that we need to make distinction between the election mandate and nation building mandate.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right? I think if you focus too much or solely on the election mandate, that will alienate other key players. So you have to incorporate this election mandate together with that nation building mandate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's right. I like that.
And on that, I think that's just been such an excellent run through of many, many factors relating to the situation in Myanmar now. So I'd like to give a really big hand to both our speakers. And do look at the club's Facebook page and website, not our Twitter account, which was hacked, so you will see some odd things on our Twitter account. We're trying to restore that at the moment. So, and do look at the program for next week, film screening, documentary screening, December the 7th, 7 p.m. here, and a discussion. Thanks all for coming.
Also, I want to announce that Chiang Mai University is holding a media freedom conference over there on the 10 and 11. So if you are in Chiang Mai, please, I was told to announce that it was sponsored by Chiang Mai University, and Yamazima News are sponsoring that event. So it's open to, and I'll be speaking on one, and Gominze, you're speaking in that?
No,
Yeah.
I'm not speaking. I'm
Okay.
joining, but-
Thanks very
So
much.
we'll be there.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mom, please stop you.